Do you two want to come in now?
No, I was just asking a question.
Sorry?
I was asking a question.
What's your question?
No, when you guys were talking, for the ones I couldn't understand, what was the purpose of his question? What did he mean by limits?
So can I?
Well, that's a question for him, not for me. Do you want to ask me a question?
I have just a brief question.
Yeah, go on. What?
It's going to be very brief.
What was the purpose of the question? Just so we can
In the
follow.
Christian doctrine,
Yeah.
We couldn't follow. Right?
are you Trinitarian, Unitarian?
There's only, look, brother, that's like asking, do you worship Muhammad? Do you don't worship
No,
Muhammad?
because if you said if I'm Shia Sunni, I just want to say.
No, hold on one second.
No,
That
okay.
question
Someone is.
is like asking a Muslim, do you worship Muhammad?
Fine. It's not a relevant question.
Is it relevant to Islam if I ask you, do you worship Muhammad?
I would say no.
Exactly. So ask a sensible question.
Fine. My sensible question is, because I've spoken to some Trinitarians, they
Yeah.
say that the Father's greatest, and then they say the Son and the Holy Spirit are lesser. Some people say it's equal,
Yeah.
and some people say, oh, those people aren't Trinitarians. So I don't want to cast any accusations. I just want to get a baseline. I don't want to insult you. That's hence my question. Let you say yourself. So I didn't mean to insult you. I'm very sorry if that came as
Okay,
an
so
insult.
to answer your question,
I haven't finished.
oh sorry, go on.
Do you believe that the Father is the greatest? And why? If so, why? Do you believe there's a hierarchy among the Trinity? I think is the crux of the question. Is there a hierarchy among the Trinity? Is the Father at the top, or is someone else at the top, or are they co-equal? That's pretty much it. Is it a hierarchy, co-equal?
Okay, so to answer your question,
Go ahead. Thank you.
as a Christian, I'm not committed, nor do I need to defend imaginative Christians, fictional Christians, or ignorant Christians. And so whether your Christians are imaginative, fictional, or just ignorant, I don't need to defend their position. I only need to defend the Christian position.
Please go ahead.
And the Christian position is that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are co-equal. Now, at the incarnation, Jesus says
Can you define incarnation? Sorry, I
yeah.
don't mean to.
Well,
I
okay.
just wanna follow along.
Do you want to do question for question?
No, I just want to follow along and understand.
Okay.
fully.
So fair
Please.
enough. That's fine.
Thank you.
So by the incarnation, what we mean is that the divine Logos, the eternal Word of God, takes to himself a human form and fills it with his person. That is literally what we mean by the incarnation. It literally means to be tabernacled or to be intented in flesh. Like, in the same way, and this is the point that Mustafa didn't understand, in the same way that Muslims believe that the Quran that is in a box in my bedroom is literally the eternal word of Allah, but yet it is coexistent in time and space, in a book, on paper and ink, inside a box, in a room, in London. Now, that is what we mean by the incarnation. So to continue my original answer, to continue with my answer, now that I've explained what incarnation is, at the incarnation, the Son takes the form of a servant. He takes the form of a man, which is obviously less than God.
Limited, more limited.
It is limited, of course.
Yeah, I'm agreeing.
Yes, absolutely, it's limited. And so when Christ is in the at the incarnation, Christ rightly says the Father is greater than I, because the Father is not incarnated, the Son is incarnated, and as we both agree, the human position is lower than the divine position, but the hierarchy exists because of the human nature, not because of the divine nature.
Fantastic, thank you. That was a very comprehensive answer. So when we say hierarchy, because they're co-equal, there isn't really a hierarchy as such. It's just because of the incarnation aspect of things.
Yeah.
So I guess my question now, and it's purely from an understanding perspective, that's why we will ask questions.
Fair enough.
Is if Christ was limited, well, he was limited. He was.
No one's disputing that.
No, he was limited.
Yeah.
Is there an argument to say that Christ is lesser than the Father because he was limited at some point in time? Bear in mind, let's say you and me have been the top tennis champions.
I'll get the question without the analogy. I can answer it without the analogy.
I just want to say,
fair enough. Go on.
It helps me.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
It helps us stick
Go
to
for it. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
We've been the top two contenders. We've been joint.
Yeah.
In tennis, right? You break your arm, you can't play tennis anymore.
Yeah.
You're limited.
Yeah.
In the game of tennis.
Yes.
Again, I don't want to, in the game of tennis, you're limited. Can someone can make the argument that you were lesser than me because for a fixed period of time, and you could say that was the duration of Christ's lifetime? I guess that's fair to say. The duration of Christ's lifetime didn't have godly attributes, therefore wasn't God. And therefore is lesser than God because of the time delta, right? One was God for much longer, had full attributes, would never relinquish godliness, godhood, whereas the other one did in the incarnation phase.
Can I reply?
Just let me wrap up. So bringing back to our
Just you're making a number of errors that I have to correct.
You can, but again, we're having the civil discussion.
Of course.
If that's okay, we can respect that. So my question, the crux of it is, and I don't really want to talk about Islam and things because it is purely an understanding point of view, is if Christ was limited for a certain period of time, for the duration of the incarnation, can you make the argument that he was less than God? If so, if not, why not?
So the answer is, I've got to correct a number of errors that you made.
Okay.
So Christians don't believe that Christ put off divine attributes to enter into his humanity. That's an erroneous doctrine called kenosis. Christians don't believe in that.
I'm just going to
right? So Christ maintains unchanged, unconfused, unmingled, and in a continuous way all of his divine attributes. But he takes to himself limitations in a humanity.
Is that during the incarnation?
In the incarnation. And as a human, Christ himself says, not me, Christ himself says that the Father is greater than I. But that is not talking about his divine nature. That is talking about his position as a human being.
At that time.
Now, this conversation isn't just going to be about Christianity, it's going to be about Islam as well.
You can make it that. I'm just
that's fine. That's fine. I also want to ask questions. I also want to learn in the spirit of understanding. Perhaps you can answer the question Mustafa didn't answer.
I'll try.
Now, are you two like cheerleaders? Like you're two in a tag team.
You mentioned
No,
me.
it's
Right.
mentioned me,
So here's the question.
Let's backtrack 2
Yeah.
minutes and then we can.
Yeah. So the question that I want to ask you is, how does Allah create a veil
Sorry, you didn't
that
answer the
limit?
original question.
No one. I did. I said in his human nature.
Okay.
So in his human unglorified nature, Christ himself says the Father is greater than I.
Okay.
Now that is not talking about his divinity.
Right, so
that
that's
is
right.
the answer.
Fantastic.
Now my question to you is, how does Allah create a veil, so it's a created thing, that now has the power to limit his infinite divine glory?
Okay, that's absolutely fine. I'm satisfied with your answer from a Christian theological perspective. And again, just to summarise from my understanding,
Okay.
before I go on to my answer, is that during the incarnation, Christ didn't lose any divine attributes. You're
Correct.
arguing he didn't give away anything.
Correct. Nothing changed.
Nothing changed.
Nothing was mingled.
Nothing was
Nothing
mixed.
is to be confused.
So there
Nothing was mixed.
There was no dual nature, divine
No.
nature, human nature.
So there's no. So
Because I hear a lot of things, I just want to clear it
we've got to
up.
be clear about our words.
I'm asking you.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be clear.
Please.
So what we say is, without confusion, without mingling,
Yes.
and without change, and without separation.
Right.
Right? Now, by analogy, to help you understand what I mean by that,
Yeah, let's go back to
it's
that.
exactly the same. My analogy for the incarnation is your doctrine about the Quran. You believe that the Quran is the eternal word of Allah.
I believe anything.
Well, actually, yeah, I did make an assumption there. I apologise. Maybe,
sorry.
yeah, maybe you're not a Muslim. But
Maybe I'm asking from a.
Yeah,
purely-
maybe. But maybe you're not a Muslim. Maybe you say that Allah.
Maybe this argument's hypothetical as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So, but as Muslims believe.
But it shouldn't be
I'm
relevant.
still
right?
one second.
It's not
No, it is relevant. It really is
Fine.
relevant.
You can come back and make it relevant.
Yeah, it really is relevant.
Please.
So the analogy that I'm using to demonstrate what I've just said about the incarnation is the Muslim doctrine, which I suspect you believe, which is that the Quran is literally the eternal word of Allah that can be found on ink and paper. And all those people in Saudi Arabia that flushing Qurans down the toilet, what they're doing is that they're damaging ink and paper. They're not damaging the eternal word of Allah, because the two never are separate. They can't be talked about as being separate things, but they're not mixed, they're not mingled, and they're not to be confused.
Okay. Fine. So, and I guess this comes back to the fact that you said that there's no intermingling between the non-divinity and the divinity nature.
They're not mingled.
Christ. Not mingled, but during the incarnation, what's the best label to give Christ while he walks on this earth, while he says the Father's greater than I?
Yeah.
Is it divine or is it human?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Okay. The answer is exactly what the church has taught for over 2,000 years. Not over 2,000, 2,000 years, which is that Christ is fully man and fully God. And we've taught that conclusively and for millennia.
Yeah, that's cool.
You know?
But if it's both, how
I have a
can they
question.
not intermingle?
Let him ask all of his questions, Firaz, and then you can jump in.
If it's not intermingling, how can it be fully man and fully God? That contradicts to me.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
Well, let me.
For me, it does. Please.
For example, there's many examples in nature where things have dual properties.
Yeah.
So light has the property of wave and particle. I'm sure you know what the triple point of, what a triple point is in terms of a chemical substance.
Yes.
It has properties of solid, liquid, and gas all at the same time.
Yes.
So this is, if we can envision that in creation, your choice is to either accuse the creator of creating a contradictory creation, or to accept that things can have multiple properties in multiple different properties simultaneously at the same point in time. And so there's no contradiction entailed. Now, my question to you, I noticed, was not answered.
No, but I wanted to finish that point.
My question to
haven't
you,
given my answer.
my question remains to you unanswered,
Please repeat.
which is this: how does Allah create a veil that limits His eternal, infinite glory?
We get to the veil part. I have to say, when you refer to the veil, I don't know what you're talking about.
It's the shank.
You can elaborate like you did with incarnation.
Okay, so in Al-Tirmidhi, right, it says that when Muhammad goes up to the highest heavens and he goes before Allah, one of the questions that Aisha asks him is, "Did you see your Lord?" And Muhammad replies, "How could I see my Lord? He is veiled in light." And in another hadith, it says that the veil of Allah is there because if it wasn't there, the glory of Allah would destroy all for as far as Allah could see. Now that obviously is saying everything, because Allah can see everything. So what you've got is an infinite power of glory being limited by a created veil. Now, my question to you is, right, does it entail any kind of contradiction for Allah to limit His divine attribute through a created thing?
Sorry, okay, sorry, I had to go a bit second.
So my question again
Yeah, please.
is, guys, and he doesn't want to be on camera, so let's just leave the cameras
I
where
am
they are.
backing up, but all the cameras are
Yeah,
coming. So
yeah.
please,
Let's just don't move the camera. So my question is this: does it entail a contradiction for Allah to have infinite, eternal glory that can destroy everything, all created things, all that Allah can see,
which is everything,
including the veil, because Allah can see the veil and Allah created the veil? Does it entail a contradiction to say that Allah's veil limits His eternal divine glory?
That's a great question.
It is, isn't it?
And I'll say the first point of the question, does it contradict the divinity of God and the supremeness of God? I'm going to say no.
Thank you.
That's the answer that we've given. The reason I say that is because God can do many things and God desires to do things. The ability and the desire of things are different, I would argue.
Yes.
I don't like saying this, but I could
Later,
punch,
let me finish with him. Sorry.
I could punch someone right now. I could. But do I want to? No. And the ability and the desire to do things are two very distinct things, right?
Yeah.
Allah can execute whatever action He desires, whether that be a thunderstorm right now, whether we just saw rain, or whether that be a forest fire, for example. He can do those things, but whether He chooses to do it is obviously up to Him and the divine will. And people call it fate, they call it destiny, call it many things. Now, onto that specific example of the idea of the veil blocking the destruction of all creation.
That's what ultimately says, yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. My question, I don't want to ask a question with a question, but my clarification or request of clarification, and you will not be able to answer this, is A, what constitutes the veil? Is it a physical thing, as we know a veil, to drape over someone's head? Or is it a metaphysical barrier that actually blocks things between realms or between states of matter? Then we move on to, and regardless of what the answer is, ultimately it comes down to the ability of Allah to destroy all of creation isn't taken away by the fact that he doesn't desire for creation to be destroyed, which is why the veil is there, because the veil could be rhetorical in the way that Allah does not want to destroy everything, and that could be described as a veil or a barrier in that way. So to cycle back, we say that it doesn't contradict the doctrine because God is not limiting the destructive capability that he has, in the sense that he destroys everything he can see. But we would say that God simply does not want to destroy everything that he can see, and therefore this veil, which may not be a physical thing, which may not be a creation, hopefully you can appreciate that, it could be a rhetorical idea or a concept of God not wanting to destroy all of creation because he loves us, because it's not within his divine plan. Again, to speculate about the reasons of God is, we can do it all day. But that would be the crux of the argument. The ability and the desire of an action are two very different things. God has the supreme will to do both, or any, or one. And that brings us to the argument that this idea of a veil does not contradict the idea of God and his all-powerfulness, because at the end of the day, God placed this veil there in an attempt for whatever his desire was.
Can I reply?
He used the ability to pass the veil.
You're doing fine, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's my first time. I'm sorry. You can tell. He used the ability to cast the veil because of a desire not to destroy. But he didn't use his ability to destroy because he didn't desire.
Can I reply now?
I think I've made my point. So
Yeah,
please.
and thank you very much for actually trying to tackle the question.
I tried.
I do appreciate it. No, you've done a very good tackling
Thanks
of the
for listening
question.
as well.
But the problem with your argument is this. Now, obviously, it depends what kind of Muslim you are, and obviously, if you belong to one of the groups of Muslims that deny the veil as a real thing,
I didn't make any distinction
and interpret
of what the veil is. I just
and
said it
interpret and it, this is where we need to pin you down, because depending on which kind of Muslim you are, like because your argument essentially says that the Hadith's description of a veil is purely metaphorical.
I didn't say that. I said
Wait. Right.
I just want to correct you.
I'll give you. I'll say the same thing that I said to Mustafa. If we interrupt one another, the whole conversation is going to break down. Yeah? And so I would ask you not to interrupt. Because I didn't interrupt you.
It's my first time. So.
Right. So, the argument that you've made, whether you like the consequences of the argument or not, is simply this. If your argument is to be sustained as the answer, and by the way, I think it's a very creative answer.
Thank you.
But if it is to be sustained, it logically follows that you have to deny the veil as an actual thing. And if you're denying the veil as an actual thing and you're turning it into a metaphor for a decision of God, right? That God is making a sovereign decision over his attributes, right? Then that means you have to argue that the veil is not real. But the problem with that is that is not what the hadiths say. The hadiths speak, and Muhammad speaks very categorically about the veil being an actual thing, not simply a word metaphor for a concept. Right?
I don't know. So.
But here's where the contradiction rubs. So listen carefully. This is the crucial bit. The hadith states that the veil stops the glory of Allah destroying the whole of creation as far as the eyes of Allah can see. If Allah can see the veil and Allah created the veil, then why does the glory of Allah not destroy the veil as well? That's the contradiction. Now, your answer is very creative.
Thank you.
It is a sustainable argument. I'm helping you now because it's your first time.
Thanks.
If you hold that line of argument, you are going to get out of my problem.
I know.
Right? So I want to ask you, do you deny the veil as a real thing and interpret the hadiths, all the hadiths that talk about the veil, as a real thing, as being simply a metaphor for a decision of God? Is that what you actually believe? Is that your hack? Is that your deen? Because if you're willing to commit to that, then we'll progress the conversation along those lines.
Right. Right, so first I'll come back to my original point, because again there wasn't a misconception on your end. I didn't suggest that the veil was metaphysical. I said it could be, because I don't know at this state of time. I haven't read the hadith from Tirmidhi. I would love to see the reference so I could study it later, so if you could provide it, that would be great. But that's for later. I didn't say it was metaphysical, I said it could be. And I think that's different from saying it is something. You know, I can say you're wearing green, I could say you're wearing a turquoisey colour. You know, couldn't, different. Could be a physical thing, could be metaphysical thing. And I did specifically state that the notion of it being physical or metaphysical really doesn't matter at the end of the day, because of the argument, and you called it creative, of God's desire to do something being different to God executing something. So, and to bring that back into a point, is that if the veil was physical, like you're arguing, like you suggest the hadith say, and again, I can't confirm that as the haqq because I haven't studied it myself. It would be foolish of me to say this is the haqq.
If you tell me what kind of Muslim you are, I might be able to tell you what you're deemed to be. Right, which kind of Sunni?
In what sense?
Are you Salafi? Okay. Hanafi.
You should have asked what school I belong to.
Well, that's a school of fiqh.
Yeah. It's fine. Hanafi, I'll give you the answer.
Okay, fair enough. Well, in my understanding, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but the Hanafi position is that the veil is a real thing.
Okay, I will study that and I'll learn something.
And feel free to come back and correct me, because I'm not 100% certain of that myself.
That's okay. But
for instance, I know Muhammad Hijab is Hanafi, or very close to Hanafi, and he believes that the veil is a created thing. Hashim is Hanafi, I believe.
These are just guys, by the way. I may not subscribe to their... Yeah.
Granted.
But I hope
but my point is, until someone proves otherwise, I'm working on the assumption that the Hanafi believe that the veil is an actual thing, not simply a metaphor for a concept.
So let's draw the benchmark. This argument is based on an assumption?
Yes.
Because you just said, you used the word assumption.
Yes.
Because I come from a mathematical background, we do proofs.
Yeah.
You start a proof by an assumption, right?
Agreed.
N equals 1, N equals
That is fine, yeah.
So that's the benchmark, we've said. My argument, as creative as it was, does say that benchmark doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because if Allah willed for something not to be the case, that would not happen.
Can I reply to that?
Actually, I just wanted to say...
Yeah, go on.
Because we did get distracted by asking what kind of Muslim I am.
True.
Yeah, so it just in that sense, I think we can wrap up quite soon, because I don't really have much else to say. But rather, the idea of the veil being physical or non-physical doesn't matter if Allah didn't will to destroy everything. And I think that's the key point that we're saying, because the event of the veil being created, as you argue, that assumption that's there, did happen, but the destruction of all life on earth didn't happen. So we can therefore say that it was within Allah's defined plan to not destroy everything within the current creation. Does that suffice?
Right, no. And here's why. It doesn't suffice for this reason. One, because if it turns out to be the position, and I'm trying to research it while you were talking, but I think I ran out of time. If the position is that the veil is a real thing, then you really do have a deep contradiction inside of Islamic theology.
Yeah.
Because Allah can see his own veil. The veil is created. So why does Allah's glory not destroy the veil? Because it says Allah's glory would destroy all that he can see.
Is that the question?
Right? No. I'm just making a point.
All right.
Now, your argument, the creative one, that you also have a duty to establish that as the deen, right? Because yes, because here's why.
Okay.
Because if you're defending something that's not actually the deen of Islam, if you're defending something that's not actually the deen of Islam, then your argument collapses. You know that.
Could be heresy, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
it's like a Mutazilite saying, well, I'll get around all the problems inside the idea of the eternal Quran by saying that the Quran is created. And they get around it. But that's not, brother, focus on me. Right, Mustafa is losing his manners. Mustafa is losing his manners. Stay focused. Right. I mean, I'm happy to have a conversation with you both. But then
to me, that's fine. But
but if he's talking to you while I'm talking to you, you then have to make a choice about whether you're going to be polite to me, your interlocutor, by listening to me or not.
Absolutely. Do you want to go back to the idea of the Mustali?
So, as you well know, if you're arguing a heretical position, your defense collapses. So just as now I have a duty to try and demonstrate that the veil is created, if you want to sustain the defense that it's just a metaphor, you have to demonstrate that argument as the dean. The idea that are you losing track of your own argument, bro?
Yeah, sorry.
Right. Here's
Let him finish, please. Sorry.
here's what you said, and it was a very creative argument. You said,
I don't think it exits. So just before you say my argument, I don't think it exits the confine of Islam.
right. So you said that the veil is not an actual thing.
No. I didn't. That was not my
No,
argument.
hold on one second. This is
I didn't say that.
No, you did.
No. I said
Right.
could
Well,
be a-
right. But that's the point. Your defense hinges on that could.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So
Based on your assumption, just like yours.
following the argument, and let's not interrupt one another because the conversation breaks down. Therefore, it is on you now to demonstrate whether you've just argued from the dean or not.
Yeah.
If you haven't argued from the dean, the defense collapses because the could goes the other way. And if the could goes the other way, my argument is sustained. And my argument, now you do maths, so you can follow this.
Yes, I've got a mathematical
Thank
proof
you.
to this.
So you know, right? Not to this, you haven't.
No, I do.
Yeah. So
what you're trying to say there is a mathematical
right. Thank you. So yes, to the logic of what I'm saying.
Yes.
So in terms of, if your argument collapses, my argument is sustained. If the could goes in the opposite direction. So I'm gonna, whilst I'm talking, you should be looking up to see whether the veil's created. And when you're talking, I need to be doing it because one of us is right and one of us is wrong.
Absolutely.
Now, hold on one
We
second.
may never know. That's the other.
Bringing it back to the incarnation,
What
right?
incarnation?
The incarnation of Christ.
Jesus.
Yes.
Oh, I wanted to talk about something else. If that's okay.
Well, you want to ask a different question?
No, I wanted to talk about the point that I made. In the sense
All right, we'll
that
focus on
because you mentioned that I made the point that the veil could be metaphysical, and that's a very bad. I said that. Go ahead.
Right, I'm going to reply to what he says. Go on.
So,
Just don't take too long.
Bob, I just thought it was kind of comical, yeah. You brought up this whole veil thing to me for about 20 minutes when we was having a discussion, and you had to Google yourself. You don't even know if it's physical or not. You've had to ask him, what's your position? Oh, I think from your Hanafi perspective, I think it's physical. Or hijab said this, hijab said that. It makes no sense.
It's not relevant.
The entire time, you don't even know.
Can I reply?
Bob. You don't even know.
Can I reply?
It's extremely dishonest, disingenuous to make a point, right? And this gentleman's already come to you here. He said to you from the very beginning, he hasn't even heard of this veil sort of argument. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't either. And it's almost like you think you've got like a trump card with us on this one. You feel like, oh, here, this is something I can use against all the Muslims. Here's this veil argument. I didn't want to argue that when I first asked you. He said to you he knows nothing about it, and you're forcing him to have a position on it. Is it physical? Is it not? He hasn't read it.
Can I reply?
He hasn't understand the context.
Can I?
And this whole argument is based on something that he didn't even know existed, and you're having to Google what your position is.
Right, let me reply.
Is that all right?
So let me reply to Mustafa's point. So
You can reply to him.
So the reason why it became important to demonstrate who's right and who's wrong
Yes.
is because it became a crux of a particular point in the
I
argument.
wouldn't say so.
Right?
That's fine.
I disagree.
Yeah.
Right?
That's okay.
And if you keep interrupting me, I'm going to start interrupting you, and you will start complaining.
I don't want to.
Right. Now, to prove to the point that I am correct in saying that the veil is a real thing, I'm going to quote a Muslim scholar from islamweb.net. And in islamweb.net, the fatwa that is given in answer to how should we understand the veil, not going to read the whole hadith because that'll use up you too much time, just going to go to the relevant point. It is a real veil. Yeah?
Can you go to the citation as well, please?
Yeah. Islam.net.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. So
Okay.
the citation, you said
Explanation of
Tirmidhi,
explanation of the hadith is veil is light.
That's
Okay.
Thank
Now,
you.
so I've demonstrated.
Quite, because you mentioned
I've demonstrated by. You wanted the citation.
The Hanafi side as
I've
well.
demonstrated the citation. Fatwa number 245. 737 from islamweb.net. Okay, now I'm going to start interrupting you now because you've been interrupting me. No, I'm going to start interrupting you unless you want to apologize. Unless you want to apologize.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay, thank you. Let's not interrupt. Let me finish then.
I'll make you my next.
Let me finish then. So I've now. Yes, of course.
I'm just going to take a photo.
Yes, absolutely. Islamweb.net. Fatwa. I'll just pause and then I'll speak later. Fatwa 24.
Because I'd love to learn this.
Islamweb.net.
Yeah, right. And let's go to the answer so you can see that as well.
But I'll read it.
It is a real veil,
Great.
as evidenced, and then he goes on to cite other hadiths. Okay, so he's citing hadiths to demonstrate that it is a real veil.
Sure.
I can read them if you want to, but you're competent to read them yourself.
Thank you.
Now, my point to you is this.
Yes.
I have now demonstrated that the veil is a real thing, not a hypothetical thing, not a metaphor for a concept. So the could be has been answered.
Correct.
It is no longer a could be, it is a real thing. Which means, as we agreed earlier, your defense has collapsed, my argument is sustained. Right? There is a contradiction inside Islamic theology.
My theology or Islamic?
Islamic theology. I don't know if you hold to Islamic theology.
Yeah, that's
Never stated that you hold to Islamic theology. I made an assumption, and I've always worked on that assumption. Now, in terms of the Islamic theology, there is a contradiction between the veil limiting the glory of Allah, right, and it being a created thing limiting Allah's eternal infinite glory. Bearing in mind that it says that everything Allah see would be destroyed.
Yes.
And can Allah not see the veil? Is he blind to the veil, or can he see it? If he can see it, then it should be destroyed by his glory. If he can't see it, then Allah is blind. How does that work? Feel free.
No, please.
Brother, don't interrupt. Yes, you are. You are interrupting. You are interrupting. He's saying, he says don't interrupt, but the moment he finds out he's a Muslim, he's suddenly okay with it.
I just want to say something.
No, brother, our conversation will end. Brother, ask Lamin. Yeah, talk to me, bro.
You can talk after.
No, I'm not talking to him. He owes me 500 quid. He's not a man of his word. I'm not interested in talking to him.
I will let him permit
Right.
to talk. But if you don't want to talk to him, that's your problem.
I will not engage in any conversation that he's a part of.
You've made your point. You don't want to
So
talk.
go on. I want to talk to you.
So you made some points. You got the fatwa
Yeah.
from islamweb.net.
Yes.
Previously, you asked me about my position as a Hanafi Sunni Muslim.
Yeah.
My question to you, because you brought this claim of the fatwa, but when I say you brought it, you've shown it to the argument.
Yeah.
I didn't bring it here.
Yeah.
Can you now ascertain whether this fatwa applies to a Hanafi Sunni like myself? Because that is pertinent, as you mentioned.
Yes, that's a very pertinent question. It's a fair
that's what I was
question.
trying to say before.
It's a fair question.
So I just wanted to make sure that if you didn't answer that or not. Now, if we can't say that, then this goes back to being an assumption for me as a Hanafi Muslim, correct?
Yeah.
The argument is still based on an assumption whether the veil is metaphysical or real. And I will answer the nature of the veil in terms of metaphysical side. Don't worry, but I'll just let you bring that forward. While you do that, I'll let you make your point. But shall I keep going on my argument?
Right. So
Because you made another point there as well.
So let me come forward. I am going to search.
find it.
I am going to search for it. I am going to find it.
I talk quite
I want to say something. Right?
But I'm not
Because the crux of the question is, however it's done, can Allah limit his attributes? Can God limit his attributes?
Is that the question?
That's the whole point of this debate. That's
that the
exactly what.
question
No. Again,
Sorry.
I'm being very patient with you.
It's my first time.
Like,
Go on,
right? Okay, I accept your apology. So the problem is that this whole debate is based around whether God can limit his attributes. And I'm demonstrating, this is just one of my two arguments, that Allah limits his own attributes.
Right.
And thus, criticizing Christianity for God limiting his own attributes in Christ is not a sustainable argument. Yeah? Right? Okay? So that's what I'm saying. Go on.
So, in the middle of my point, when I mentioned the idea of this is my cousin.
Right.
So the idea of if I'm a Hanafi Muslim, a Hanafi Sunni Muslim, does this fatwa apply to me? You've brought that evidence, you need to support your claim. Now, we go back to the argument of, you said that whether the veil is real a physical created. That destabilizes my argument. And then you also brought up something else which we've trailed off. Oh, you brought up the idea that the crux of my argument was if the veil was physical or not. But I very clearly state, and you did misinterpret, was that the crux of my argument was that Allah's abilities, i.e. his capabilities, are different from his desires. And I made the point where I can punch someone, I have the capability, I have arms, and I'm a pretty strong guy, I can punch someone, but I don't have the desire to execute that action.
Yep.
And that was the crux of my argument, which you missed because you said that it was about the vertical physical veil.
Right, sorry, I need to pay attention to this because you're saying that I missed your argument once and I was reading.
Yeah.
State it again.
I'll repeat. So, if I'm quoting you correctly, you said that my argument was based on the crux of whether the veil was metaphysical or physical.
That is exactly what you base your argument on. You said could.
So, yes.
And you repeated it.
So it was a possibility.
Yes.
It's an assumption.
Yes.
But it wasn't the crux of it wasn't the main point of the argument I was bringing. It's actually irrelevant to the argument because the actions of God can be different from, the capabilities of God can be different from the desires of God. We know very clearly that whatever God wills becomes the actions of God, and that becomes, enacted. Let's say that's the root word of the word action. Sorry, I'm waffling. So that was the crux of the argument, which I think we've diverted from talking about the veil. I'm happy to talk about the veil because you brought forward something, and whether that applies to me, you're still determining, because you know I'm a Hanafi Sunni Muslim, and this fatwa may or may not apply to me, and yeah, that's what you're trying to achieve right now. But my key fundamental is, if the veil is real, which you're arguing, so shall we benchmark the argument if the veil is real? Is a quick question to you, yes or no?
I mean, that is the crux of this particular question.
Yes, it is. So
yeah.
let's start with that baseline.
Well, 1 second, because
because I've still got to go. If we start with the veil being a physical thing,
yeah.
Your question was, why doesn't Allah destroy the veil itself and all of creation? Because either Allah's blind, as per your argument, or he can't see the veil, which obviously would be if he's blind, or for some reason the veil is blocking his sight. Now, my answer to that, and I hope you can appreciate, is that Allah did not desire to crush or to destroy the veil, and therefore destroy all of creation. It's not that if the veil was real, like you're arguing, or like the argument is being based off, then that doesn't take away from the fact that Allah is divinely powerful. It just means that Allah simply does not want to destroy the veil. Just like in the same capacity, He does not want to enact a tsunami that takes over the whole world, right? I think they're the same thing. The desire to destroy the world through His sight of everything He can see, or the desire to cause a tsunami.
Right. I mean, the argument is being repeated. Like, I don't need to go back over.
Bring that back up.
We don't need to go over the crux of the arguments again and again and again. Okay. So, like, I am 99% certain, and I'm only needing that to demonstrate the proof because you asked me to.
Yeah, you made a claim.
Yeah.
So it's fair.
Well, absolutely, and you have also made a claim. This idea that the veil is not an actual thing. Right, but that's the point. Your hype, and this is you can follow the logic of this. I know you can, and you already have demonstrated that you can. So I don't know why you want to obfuscate suddenly. The reality is that your argument is based on a hypothetical, and if your hypothetical is not Islamic deen, it's not Hanafi school, right? Then your argument collapses. So there is some onus on you to demonstrate what is the Hanafi position. I am now asking you to demonstrate what is the Hanafi position about the veil. I'd like you to demonstrate that from a source that you cite.
You're asking for
right?
a source.
1 second. I haven't finished.
Okay.
Right? The reality is that's one argument that we've looked at. And I applaud you for being willing to engage in it in a way that others around you have not.
Was it a good argument?
Yeah? It's a very creative argument.
Was it good?
Well, let's put it this way. If it turns out to be the Islamic position that the veil is not a real thing, it is just a kind of religious language for a choice that God is making, then what it would do is it would get out of a contradiction.
So it's a good argument?
Yes.
Thanks.
But you've now got to demonstrate. Yeah, I'm happy to admit that.
There's
right,
examples
but one second.
I'll
But what I would need you to demonstrate is that's the Hanafi position.
Absolutely.
Right. So now you must do that.
Okay.
That is now on you to do that
Understood.
because you have made a claim.
Okay.
Right. But
Can I go?
I actually think when you investigate it, that you're going to find the evidence goes the other way.
That's your hypothesis.
Yes, it is.
The scientific.
And I'm allowed the hypothesis.
Absolutely.
Right. And I bet I am willing to buy you a cup of tea and a sandwich of your choice.
Sounds like a bet.
Right? It's up to you whether you take it. But I'll buy you a cup of tea and a sandwich of your choice if it turns out the Hanafi school goes the other direction.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Okay. Now, if it stands that the veil is a real thing, as the only evidence on the table so far is Islam Web, the fatwa that I showed you, yes, and I showed you the reference, said the veil is a real thing, then that means your could-be argument flips in the other direction, and your defense fails, because your defense is couched on the idea that it is not an actual thing, it is not a real thing, it's just religious metaphorical language for a decision.
I'll tell you.
And that's the argument you've sustained throughout. Now, that in itself doesn't stop whilst it gets out of a certain kind of contradiction, it does demonstrate that Allah can limit his attributes by a choice. And if Allah can limit his attributes by a choice, then we Christians can say the same, that the Trinity limits in the person of the Son, in his human nature, the attributes of that divine person in that human nature by a choice. Because if the defense works for Muslims, the defense works for Christianity. Do you agree?
It's reflexive. I agree.
Thank you.
Goes one way. X implies Y. X implies Y. Y implies X.
Thank you very much.
I'm not going to deny that.
This is why I like arguing with mathematicians.
Yes, I am a mathematician, and I will bring forth a mathematical point. The idea of the veil being metaphysical was something called a proof by contradiction. You know this? You know this term?
No.
Okay. So a proof by contradiction is you say that's a tree. We say you're arguing that's a tree, and I'll say, well, there's a trait of a tree, physical or not metaphysical. We have to focus on the trait, and then we'll argue the contradictory. Say, we know trees are flammable. If I prove the tree's not flammable, I could argue that's actually not a tree. That is perfectly valid mathematical proof. And the use of my proof by contradiction was, if you're arguing that the veil is if the veil is physical, created, then if we take the contradictory approach, if the veil is metaphysical, then does the argument destabilize? How does that play out?
With respect, bro.
Yes.
You're arguing a proof to a logic that we both agree upon. There's no reason to prove the logic. We're both using the same logic.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
We're allowed to prove things that already exist.
I know, but I'm just saying we're kind of wasting a bit of time here because we're both using the same logical principles, and you're now trying to prove to me the logical principle that we're both using.
I just want to state the logical principle.
Right,
just
that's fine.
Because you didn't know proof by contradiction.
I didn't know the term.
Yeah.
But the point is, as I've demonstrated, is if X equals Y, Y equals X, and so if it works in Islam, it works in Christianity. If Allah can limit his attributes, as your argument would follow, that if he limits his attributes by a choice, then that means that the God of Christianity can limit his attributes by a choice.
One moment. So, I've just talked about the proof by contradiction. That was it. Now you've asked to bring an onus. You've talked about the onus of bringing the fatwa from a Hanafi Sunni perspective of whether the veil was real or not.
No, that the veil is not real, which is what your argument is sustained by.
Well, because we know it's a proof by contradiction, that is what it's sustained by, right?
Right, so you've got to bring the proof. So bring the fatwa. Bring the fatwa from a Hanafi school that says the veil is not an actual object. It's not a real thing. But it's got to be a Hanafi source.
Because that's what I would believe.
Right, well, you've got to demonstrate it now.
You're lose your mind if I say something like
that. Well, let me reply to him.
Do I have to bring it out? Because I really like this conversation.
I'll happily have it, because if you want, we can park that point of the discussion.
I think it was a good discussion.
It really was.
Yeah.
What's your name again?
My name is Mohammed.
Mohammed, that was a really lovely conversation.
It was good to talk to you. There were a few missteps along the way. I didn't want to interrupt you.
And vice versa.
And hopefully I didn't want to insult you as well.
You didn't insult me. Well, not when we were talking anyway. Right, I'd like to give you a gift because I always enjoy whenever I have have you got? I will give you a gift as well. I will give you a gift. Have you got a Bible, bro?
I don't. I do read the Bible via.
There you go. Now you've got an analog copy.
Is this your Bible or
No, it's not mine. I'm giving them away.
a Bible?
It is a Bible. That is now your
Which
Bible.
Bible is it? Oh, King James.
King James translation.
Does this have
Now,
the story of the adulterous woman in it?
Yes, it will have. In John chapter.
I don't know about it. I hear people
The
talking.
adultery pericope is in there.
I've got defects.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been removed.
Right.
I've got great defects.
I mean, if you want to talk about that, we can do.
Is this not someone's?
No, that's yours.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
It was mine. I'm giving it to you. Yeah, let me get you a gift as well, just so you don't feel left out.
I think the argument ended well. To summarise,
Yeah, go on. I'm listening.
the veil. Whether or not it's metaphysical.
Just a gospel for you,
Appreciate
bro.
it. Gospel.
No worries.
Do you want the Bible instead?
No, that's yours. Why? I just gave you a gift.
As in, if he wants
Just giving
it,
it away right in front of me.
That's a nice gift.
I'll give him a Bible. Right, go on.
I will read it in the pursuit of knowledge.
Go on, sorry.
That was
you
it.
finish.
No, I'm
All right,
done.
Mohammed, come back to me. Let's talk
See,
some more.
I'm a busy guy, like I said,
Yeah.
I'm a mathematician. But you're asking for a fatwa from a Hanafi
School
from a
that
Hanafi
says the
position.
veil is not an actual thing. It's not a real thing.
But if I do prove that it is metaphysical,
Then we have another argument.
there's another argument. If I prove that it's physical, there is still the argument that God's actions and desires.
I want to be clear about our language, because you're a mathematician,
Yes,
but I've done a bit of theology.
sure. Yeah,
Got to be
valid,
clear.
valid.
Metaphysical is not equal to material.
No, I know that. That's why I
Right.
made the
Okay.
distinction.
So what I'm saying is, let's say real.
Yeah.
Your argument, if it works, is based on the idea that it's unreal and that it's just a linguistic phrase to talk about a veil referencing a decision.
Yeah, and that's because it's a proof by contradiction.
So you've got to demonstrate that it is just a non-real thing that's religious language talking about a decision.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
in a proof by contradiction, you have to bring that claim.
Yeah.
So it's valid for me.
I'm not so sure it rests on that, but that's what I want to say.
But I was just going to say, if
You
I
have
bring
the last
claim-
word, and then Mustafa wants
No,
to say.
I just want to
Go
say,
on.
whether or not I bring so if the veil is created,
Yeah.
real, there is still potential for me to make another argument similar to that. Would you say? We can explore that at a later date.
If it's real, then obviously you can marshal some of the defence.
But I think I have a hypothesis.
But I think you're going to be surprised. I think the Hanafi school is going to come out on my side, not yours.
I think I have a 99% hypothesis
Sorry.
that if the Hanafi perspective is that the veil is real,
Which I think it is.
created, fine. I think the argument that I made of Allah's capabilities and His desires to do things still holds. And we'll make the argument when I bring that claim.
Brilliant.
When I can.
And
I
when
won't
you-
promise a
That's
certain
fine.
date because
I won't hold you to it.
Yes.
But when you do, you'll demonstrate that Christianity has no contradiction by saying that in the incarnation
We'll have
there's
to explore those
limitations.
things. We'll have to explore.
Bob, we're talking about
Go on, Mr.
contradictions,
Sorry.
yeah?
Yeah.
And you're making an example that if I was to reject your claims of hypocrisy, I would have to make the same hypocrisy contradictions within Islam.
Yeah.
Right? So how does that benefit Christianity? Because if all you're saying is you're basically confirming what the Quran says, and you're saying this also applies to Christianity. You're basically saying my ideology, not just Islam is not wrong. You're basically saying Islam is right because the contradictions that I say, where God can't be limited, but you're saying He can, and you're giving me examples where God is limited in the Quran. You're basically saying, oh, the Quran has some validity and some credibility, right? So how does the Quran being subject to the same level of critique benefit you? Because you haven't addressed the issue of, oh, we're wrong, so they're wrong too. That means I'm right. That's not necessarily
Can
works.
right, let me
You
explain.
understand my question?
Yes, I do. Right? So the thing that's being critiqued in my counter argument is the Islamic, the assumptions behind the Dawah-Gandhist question, the Da'i question. Right? What I'm actually saying is, right, Islamic theology about the Quran and about the veil works.
For Christianity.
No, listen. It works for Islam, right? It's a consistent argument, right? But that theology, Mustafa, Muslims borrowed from Christians because Christians were making it centuries before Islam from the Council of Ephesus, right? So what's actually being critiqued isn't Islam, right? What's being critiqued is these kind of childish, silly arguments that Muslims make where they attack Christianity saying, well, how can God be limited? How can God do this and be that? It's that kind of mentality and argument that's being critiqued.
Yes,
I'm actually not criticizing Islam because strictly speaking, the theology that is in the books of your scholars makes sense. Because, and why do I agree with it? Because our scholars make exactly the same arguments. And it works for Islam, which means X equals Y, like your mathematician friend said. So if it works for Islam,
That's a different guy.
right? If it works, it is a different guy. Yeah, he's just been promoted to mathematician, by the way, right? If it works for Islam, then it works for Christianity, which means that it's the question itself that is silly. It's the argument itself that is silly, right? And that's what's going on there.
So in terms of the contradiction in itself, you can't really use that as a means to sort of make a point against. You can't make that as a point against Islam then, because you're basically saying your question. I understand what you're saying now. You're saying your question doesn't make sense because if you was to agree with me, it's got the same holes in your ideology. Yeah, that's what you're basically saying.
Yeah, I'm saying if it sinks, what I'm saying is this. If your argument,
But that's if Islam is saying that God has limitations. We're not.
Mustafa, listen. I'm saying to you, if your argument sinks Christianity, it sinks Islam. If your defense that would protect Islam from your own argument works for Islam, then that same defense works for Christianity. It's X equals Y, Y equals X thinking, and so it's what's being criticized, to be clear, Mustafa, isn't Islam. What's being criticized is the silly kind of argument that gave rise to the question in the first place, that strawmans Christianity on one side and then ignores Orthodox Islam on the other side. Because an intelligent person would be consistent in the way that they apply principles across the board. And,
So
and
your
mathematically that makes
applies,
sense.
Your argument only applies if indeed the references that you're quoting for the veil of Islam of Allah and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So if it is actually proving that there's limitations,
Yes.
then yes, I can see the correlation there.
Correct.
But if your point in the veil of Allah doesn't actually prove limitation,
Yeah.
then it's not the same. It's not one for all. It's not like this point is the same as that point. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah. No, that's a fair question. That's a fair point.
So when we sort of like really go into it, it's not if you take it from my perspective, if it's not a contradiction that's a limitation of God, your argument of you've applied the same logic, it destroys your argument too. It wouldn't,
Yeah.
because if it isn't a limitation, then we're back to square one of me questioning you and saying you have limitations, we don't.
Right. So let me answer this. It depends what kind of conversation you want to have, whether you want to have an honest conversation or just a polemical conversation. Because if you're going to have an honest conversation, you have to actually deal with what Christians believe. Christians don't believe that the divinity is limited. Now you've just heard that in black and white, clearly, right? You can now never go away, unless you suffer some blow to the head, and say that Christians believe that the divinity has limitations, because I literally just tell you the opposite. What we believe is that human beings have limitations, and that the divine Logos took to himself a humanity, and in that humanity experiences limitations, right? That is what we as Christians believe.
And I think, Bob, that is where the disagreement comes in, because
That's where Dawagandis get it wrong all the time.
you can say we get it wrong, I can say you got it wrong.
How can I?
It's just
What's
where
it?
the difference is.
Mustafa, no offence,
That's why he doesn't.
but out of the two of us, which one studied Christianity academically? I have. Right? So in terms of ranking of learning, I have a degree that included a substantial study of Christianity. What do you, in the game of trumps, what do you want to put up against my degree? In other words, when I tell you that Christians don't believe that the divinity has limitations, it's not open for you to go, well, maybe Christians don't believe that. No, that's what Christians believe. Like if you turn, wait, I'm landing, and then you can reply. It's like me, if a Christian came up to you and said, why do you Muslims worship Muhammad? It's a black and white reply. Muslims don't worship Muhammad, and no amount of me saying Muslims worship Muhammad will make Muslims worship Muhammad. Likewise, doesn't matter how many times Muslims say we Christians worship 3 gods, we don't. Doesn't matter how many times you say we think God became a man, we don't. What we say is Christ took to himself a humanity. It's different from saying God changed into a humanity. The key word in that sentence is the word change. And if you don't want me to make false accusations about Islam, don't make false accusations about Christianity. Is that fair?
Cool, man.
Yeah.
So in terms of
Proof all things.
you're bringing up your degree in some sort of Christian education.
Yeah, religious
And you're saying,
studies.
and you're basically saying to me, what do you have to trump that?
Yeah.
I don't need anything to trump that. I'm simply asking a question about contradiction and trying to understand logical why you believe this, and I'm trying to explain that's the why what I believe.
Yeah.
There's people who've got more qualifications in Islam, Judaism, and everything.
Yeah.
Doesn't automatically trump your opinion or your views as being valid, wrong, or anything. right?
Agreed.
So,
It is.
So I don't understand what your whole point was when you said, "Oh, I don't know if you're trying to belittle me." When you're trying to say, "Oh, what do you have that equates to a religious
No,
education?"
Mustafa, definitely not.
GCSE?
Let me explain. No, let me explain. Right? It's because when I raised a certain point, you seemed, at least to my hearing, to suggest the idea that it was up for debate about what Christians believe about the incarnation. Christians have been clear about the incarnation since Chalcedon, right? And that's centuries before Islam, and so there's no area of this conversation that has not already been covered, where Christians have not expressed clearly what they believe about the incarnation. And from Ephesus, which precedes Chalcedon, because Chalcedon is an interpretation of Ephesus, it's a clarification of Ephesus, but from Ephesus, the writings of the fathers and the writings of the councils is that we don't say the divinity changed into a humanity. We don't say that the divinity died. We don't say that the divinity suffered. We don't say that the divinity became hungry. We don't say that the divinity, we say that the human person, Jesus Christ, who was filled by that divine person, experiences hunger, is born, suffers pain, because he is a human. And that's not something that the divine changes into. It is something that the divine creates over there and dwells inside of. Yeah? And an analogy to that, it's very similar to what Muslims believe about the Quran. You believe that Quran that's in Arabic is actually the eternal word of Allah, right? But here it is in your hand. You're touching it. You're reciting it. You're seeing it with your eyes. Because in Islamic theology, they believe that the paper and the ink and the eternal word of Allah are like that. But they're never confused, they're never mingled, they're never one changing into the other. What does that sound like? That sounds like Christian theology, because that's where the Muslims got it from.
What's the evidence that the Christians were copied by the Muslims? I don't understand. I don't see how those 2 points can sort of correlate, because they're two completely separate things. We keep going around in circles, Bob. We keep mentioning the Quran as if it's the same as a human being. There's no correlation between the two, because God can reveal a message. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to enter into a physical being. And then you're trying to differentiate between God is always unlimited. But here you have a human being who is limited.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the only thing that I'm really struggling to accept. And again, you got a GCSE, did you say, in religious education?
Degree,
right?
Yeah.
So I'm taking it.
It's all right. Fair jokes. Go on.
So
Fair quality.
this is the only thing that it's very hard for me to accept. This is one of the reasons that I'll always struggle to accept Christianity.
Yeah.
It's because you guys don't want to admit that the limitation, and you can say that we've been believing this for X amount of thousands of years, and all the scholars and all these believe this, you believe this, you can say what you want, but it just doesn't resonate with me that a human being can be God and have limitations, and like you said, have hunger, don't be self-sufficient, and it's hard for me to admit that.
Can I reply?
Yeah, without going into, I don't want to sort of.
I think we should wrap it up.
We should.
Yeah. So I'll let you finish and then I'll reply and then...
Yeah, so I mean that's the only thing that I would struggle with, Bob, is sort of accepting that Jesus is either sent by God or is God or is the Son of God. I don't know what your position on that is.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do this another time.
Yeah, I'll be
And
happy to talk
definitely
to you
look into
another
that
time.
veil. I'll look into that veil thing and
Yeah.
maybe come up with my own conclusion because I don't know.
Okay.
You keep bringing it up as if it's some sort of like trump card, but I think if we truly understand it, I don't think it's a big contradiction or a problem as you're making it out to be.
Can I reply? So the crux of this debate, is can God limit himself? Now we're saying God limits himself in the sense that he takes to himself a human nature, possesses it and lives through it. And in that human nature there is limitation. And I'm pointing out that in Islam, in terms of your understanding of the Quran and in the terms of your understanding of the veil, you also believe that God can create something that limits his attributes.
That's that translation
and we need to,
is correct according to you.
Yeah, and we need to be very, very clear about what's actually being limited. It is in specifically to your question about knowledge. What's being limited is the attribute of access, not the attribute of knowledge, right? And that's why I tried to make that distinction earlier about the distinction between the possession of knowledge and access to knowledge, because you can possess knowledge that you don't have access to. So what exactly is being limited? From the Christian perspective, what is actually being limited is not the possession of knowledge. The divine knowledge is not destroyed, it doesn't disappear, it doesn't vanish, it doesn't go somewhere else. It's there with Jesus, but he doesn't have access to it because it is the attribute of access that is being limited at the incarnation, right? Like Allah limits the destructive power of his glory. What's being limited? His glory? No. But the destructive power of Allah's glory is being limited by the veil. And if the veil is created,
My last question.
yeah, and then if the veil is created, then Allah can limit his attributes by creation, which means Muslims believe what Christians believe. We just apply it to different things.
I appreciate your answer, by the way.
Okay.
So going back to the veil and the limitations, if I can demonstrate to you that isn't in fact a limitation,
Yeah.
you wouldn't really have an argument and say that compares now to Jesus' limitation or lack of knowledge or access to knowledge.
Yeah. You would have to demonstrate that.
Yeah, so I would have to come back and say to you, look, the veil is this. It's not physical veil, or even if it is a physical veil, the limitations are this and this.
Yeah.
So if I can come and prove that to you maybe next week, because I don't know anything about this veil argument.
Yeah.
And you seem to know more about it than me. So I would
yeah.
like to have more knowledge on that.
Okay.
And then come back another time and have a bit.
That's absolutely fine. I'd love to do that, Mustafa. And I appreciate that we've ended better than maybe we've got in the middle. We started well, we get kind of wobbled in the middle, but we've ended well, and that's great. Yeah, and so are you. I like you, Mustafa.
And from the videos I've seen of you, I'm not gonna lie, you came across as a bit of a like.
Yeah.
Not the greatest guy, but like talking to you.
Can we stick that on record? He said I was cool.
Come across as a bit of disingenuine. You come across as a bit as disingenuine.
Well, I hope now you know that's not true.
You are sometimes. You are.
From what I've learned about you, you're not as bad as I seem.
Yeah,
You're not as bad.
even Lamin's just admitted that it's only sometimes.
Yeah.
So my point is, it's not all the time,
Not all the
right?
time,
And that means that I'm human, like everybody else. So my point to you is this, right? If you can come back to me and demonstrate that the veil, and I want to make sure that when you come back, we don't get off to a false start. So I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying that the veil is physical. What I'm saying is the veil is real. Because there are things that are real that are not physical, like truth.
So you're saying it's not a physical thing?
I make no comment. I'm agnostic as to whether it's physical or not. I'm just saying it's real. So like numbers are real, truth is real, morality is real, but these are not physical things, but they're still real things, they're still true things. And so what I'm saying is the veil is a real thing.
But how would I, again, based on
Now, Mustafa, do you really want me to help you make your defence?
Because what you're saying to me is, here's the standard that I would accept, and you're basically not giving me a standard. How am I going to prove to you something that's not real physically?
Yeah.
Is then I'm able to present it as something that is limited.
Right, I'll help you. Right, you've got to demonstrate, right?
I would like to have a clean slate of an answer that I can give.
Sure.
Without you saying to me, by the way, my position is this, and you have to go around it. Maybe your position is wrong from the very get-go, and I can present something completely different.
Right, so I'll give you a hand. You know Mohammed that was here? He gave a really good defence, right? But it was contingent upon the veil not being a real thing. His argument was dependent upon the talk about the veil simply being lexical to like a word metaphor for a decision that Allah makes.
Yes.
Now, that argument actually gets round my contradiction, right? Now, please don't. I'm saying it gets round, so I'm not. Brother, focus on me, right? So I'm not being unreasonable. I've just admitted that if he demonstrates that the veil is not a real thing, then he has escaped my argument. Right? So I'm not saying that I've come up with some unanswerable question, but now the onus is on you and me to go away and do our research. I'm pretty sure I'm right. The Muslim position is that the veil is a real thing, and the reason why I say that, is because I've spoke to Hashim, I've spoke to Mohammed Hijab. They have all stated that the veil is a real thing, in person to my face, off camera, right? So that's why I'm confident. And I also showed a fatwa from a Muslim website saying that the veil was a real thing. And I've read other things in Islam that I couldn't find right now that talk about the veil being a real thing. So in other words, if you can demonstrate to me that it is Islamic deen that the veil is not real, then you have escaped my argument. So there you go.
Cool, man.
All right, you look after yourself, Mustafa.
You too.
Take care.
Man.
God bless.
This guy really wants to talk to you.
I know he does, but until he pays me the £1,000 he owes me. Yeah, I know, right? I know. No, it's right. So until he pays me the money that he owes me, I won't debate him. And that's been my position for years. Because he said,
Ask him first.
he said that if I end, and we've got it on camera, you can see it on social film. If I debate him on a question, he would give me £500. I debated him on a question, he never gave me £500. Now you ask me, should a Muslim keep his word?
Listen, Aki.
Mustafa? Right, Mustafa, I'm going to go. You look after yourself. Have a good day. Right.
Also, the video, they counted. I'm going to say it's been counted.
Thank you very much. Right, does everybody want to collect their microphones? Have I got one of yours, Sam?
You never debate with me. Never.
Hey there, buddy. Peace, me, bro. Still not got the money. I hope you guys are all just going to cut off. I hope you guys, Christian channels, are all just going to cut Lamin off.
Yeah, it's cut.
Right. Why do you want to do something?
We're blurring your face.
I owe him money. What is the evidence?
Which one's yours? This one.
We need to enter.
Challenge.
I hope you're going to cut Lamin off.
Yeah, we will.
I'm going.
Okay, what happened there, Bob?
So me and Mustafa had a really good conversation at the end.
Okay.
And me and Mohammed had a good conversation about the incarnation and about whether the veil of Allah is limiting the divine attributes of Allah.
Why you scared, Bob?
If the veil of Allah is limiting the divine attributes of Allah, then Allah has been limited by His creation.
Debate.
Right.
Bob has been running. Okay, he's running.
Everybody's just getting cut off, Lamin.
Don't
reward Lamin.
Running up from me. Running away. Run again. Can't run again. He's running again.
Why love it?
For 8 years.
Hey, love it. You got
He said I owe him money.
you got to debate Orlando next week, though.
I brought £1,000 here.
How many?
You
How much?
you remember?
1,900. I remember
Can you count it?
1,900.
No.
Which one?
On YouTube, £1,000 challenge. Lamin versus Bob. They counted the money. He was there. They counted. You are laughing. They counted the money.
and the man ran away like a chicken had the wind. Tells them about each other.
Yeah.
And now,
Both run away, both
and then
deny.
people
Both
want to
deny.
the culture, life about Islam. Let's debate the Quran or the Bible. Which one is the word of God? Yeah. Who is God?
Lami, you're gonna debate
Who is the
Orlando next
creator?
week, yeah? You agree?
How do you attain salvation? You want to know? He run away
Orlando.
like a wind.
No, but you agree next
Win,
week.
win.
No, you agree that Orlando's gonna debate you next week.
Next week I'll debate you Orlando. Forget about it.
Yeah.
Next week I agree. I don't know.
Quran only.
Listen, I don't look Quran only. Listen to me.
You agreed. You agreed.
Quran only.
No, but you said yes.
Listen to me.
You said
listen. Come here. Look.
Okay, yeah,
listen.
we on camera.
Look.
Go on, Lami.
No, I agree. I agree with Orlando.
Well done, Lami.
Next
Well
week-
done, Lami.
God.